Alright, so Apple sells a lot of different iPads right now. So in this video, we're going to step through all the key characteristics of each model to help you decide which iPad is going to provide the best overall value for you. So let's kick things off with the base model iPad 11th Gen, which costs $350. And this is going to be the best choice for people who want to use their iPad for typical iPad things, being content consumption, casual web browsing and emailing, and maybe some FaceTime or video calls. The base model iPad 11th Gen upholds the general principles that the iPad was introduced with all the way back in 2010, being a touch input device for casual web usage. It features an 11-inch LCD display and is powered by the A16 chip with 6 gigs of RAM. This is the same processor and amount of RAM that powers the iPhone 14 Pro, so it's not a performance monster, but it doesn't need to be for what you'll likely be doing on this iPad. It features Touch ID biometric authentication built right into the power button, and you get a fantastic landscape 12 megapixel center stage camera that keeps you in frame as you move for your video calls, and you get a rear facing at 12 megapixel camera. There's only a couple real downsides to the base iPad 11th Gen, and they both have to do with accessory support. The first of which being an inferior keyboard accessory sold by Apple, being the Magic Keyboard Folio case, as opposed to the sturdier and more functional non-folio Magic Keyboard that they sell for the higher end iPad Air M3s and the iPad Pro M5s. But I wouldn't consider this as a major downside for the base model iPad 11th Gen, as there's tons of great third-party keyboard options available, just not sold by Apple themselves. And the Magic Keyboard Folio case isn't bad by any means, it's just not as premium as the non-folio Magic Keyboard, and as again some of the other third-party options that you can get for the iPad 11th Gen here. The potentially bigger drawback for some people is going to be the limited Apple Pencil support. The base model iPad 11th Gen here only supports the base model Apple Pencil USB-C version. It doesn't support the higher end Apple Pencil Pro, which has a handful of useful features such as pressure sensitivity, the ability to double tap and squeeze the pencil for changing between different tools, wireless pairing and charging, Find My support, and more. You still get support for, again, the standard Apple Pencil USB-C version, which might be enough for you, but if you're someone who does a lot of drawing or creation with an Apple Pencil, this could potentially be the biggest deal breaker for the base model iPad 11th Gen. But other than this, the base model iPad 11th Gen is going to be, without question, the best iPad for most people, as it provides probably everything that you're going to need out of an iPad with a full 11-inch display, which is the same starting display size as the higher-end M3 iPad Air and M5 iPad Pro models, all at a pretty good price of $350. And speaking of the Apple Pencil, if you use one, chances are you're going to love the Paperlike 3 screen protector who sponsored today's video. The Paperlike 3 gives you the feeling of writing on premium paper when writing or drawing on your iPad with an Apple Pencil. Thanks to the latest version of their Nano Dots microtexture technology, you get just the right amount of resistance and friction when writing or drawing, resulting in an impressive paper-feeling experience without compromising on display quality. The Paperlike 3 is extremely thin. It's below Apple's maximum screen protector thickness of 0.95 millimeters, which results in the most precise Apple Pencil input possible. Paperlike's new Butterfly application system makes installing the screen protector easier than ever, ensuring you get a dust-free and perfectly aligned installation. It even features an interactive on-screen guide live on your iPad to help you through the process. So if you're looking to drastically improve your digital writing or drawing experience, click on the link in the video description down below to check out the Paperlike 3 screen protector. And big thanks to Paperlike for sponsoring this video. Okay, so next up we have the most unique device in the lineup, being the iPad Mini 7th Gen, which costs $500. And this is an iPad that I don't recommend most people buy, as here in 2026, this device doesn't make sense for most people, as modern phone screens are almost the same size as the very small 8.3-inch LCD display that the iPad Mini has. This being said, there's still clearly a demand for the iPad Mini, as Apple has continued to make them for well over a decade. I think a lot of the people that buy iPad Minis are really diehard fans for the iPad Mini and use them for one specific purpose. A common one that I've heard is people in the medical field using them to jot down notes and then easily slip it into their pocket. Another scenario is pilots, actually, believe it or not, using it in the cockpit as a control device in a plane, as it's the perfect sized device for that environment. It's powered by the A17 Pro chip with 8 gigs of RAM, which is the same processor and amount of RAM that powers the iPhone 15 Pro. So again, it's not going to be the most powerful device out there, but obviously an iPad mini doesn't need to be. It features Touch ID biometric authentication built into the power button as well, and you get a 12 megapixel center stage camera that keeps you in frame as you move for video calls that's located in the vertical orientation. As with a device in this form factor, you're likely going to be holding it vertically, in addition to a 12 megapixel rear facing camera. And interestingly enough, the iPad mini 7th gen has a flash alongside its camera as well. It should go without saying for a device of this size, but Apple doesn't sell any keyboard accessories for the iPad mini 7th gen. There are some third-party options available, but chances are if you want to use your iPad with a physical keyboard, the iPad mini 7th gen probably isn't the best iPad for you. Interestingly enough though, the iPad mini 7th gen supports both of the currently sold Apple Pencil versions, being the base model Apple Pencil USB-C and the higher-end Apple Pencil Pro, with the additional features like pressure sensitivity, the ability to double tap and squeeze the pencil for changing between different tools, wireless pairing and charging, Find My support, and more. So if you're a power user of the Apple Pencil, you can use your iPad mini 7th gen as a little sketchbook with full Apple Pencil Pro support. At the end of the day though, as I said earlier, I don't recommend most people buy an iPad mini 7th gen unless you have a specific use case in mind for it where it makes sense. As for most people, it's probably going to be too close to the size of smartphones here in 2026 to actually be worth the purchase. So next we have the iPad Air M3, which comes in two different sizes, being the 11-inch model, which costs $600, and the larger 13-inch model, which costs $800. Both having LCD displays. This is Apple's mid-tier iPad offering, and I think there's two scenarios where the iPad Air M5 is a great iPad to buy. The first of which being if you want the cheapest iPad that has flagship processing power. If you have a heavy iPad workflow that involves complex video, photo, or audio editing, snagging an iPad Air M3 will ensure that you'll have enough power to get everything you need done without having to spend $1,000 or more on an iPad Pro M5. As the iPad Air's M3 chip with 8 gigs of RAM is an absolute monster of a processor. I definitely don't think it's worth getting an iPad Pro M5 just for the extra processing power that the M5 has, as even for power users, the difference between an M3 chip and an M5 chip probably isn't going to be enough to warrant doing so, especially in an iPad. The second scenario where the iPad Air M3 is a great buy is if you just want the cheapest big-screened 13-inch iPad that you can get, as you can't get the base model iPad 11th gen in any size other than 11 inches. The iPad Air M5 features Touch ID biometric authentication, also built right into the power button, and you get that great landscape 12 megapixel center stage camera that keeps you in frame as you move for all your video calls, and a rear-facing 12 megapixel camera. Both iPad Air M3 models are a bit thinner than the base model iPad 11th gen, not by much though. And as I mentioned earlier, Apple does sell a version of the premium Magic keyboard for the iPad Air M5, which is the best style of iPad keyboard that Apple sells, and it also fully supports both current Apple Pencil options, being the base model Apple Pencil with USB-C and the Apple Pencil Pro with all the features like pressure sensitivity. You could double tap and squeeze the pencil to change between different tools, you get wireless pairing and charging, Find My support, and more. So no sacrifices there either. The iPad Air M3s basically offer flagship processing power and capabilities in the same form factor as the base model iPad 11th gen. So if you want the horsepower but don't care about having a slightly less premium design in comparison to the higher end iPad Pro M5s, which we're going to talk about in a second, the iPad Air M3s are a solid choice. Or, as I said before, maybe you just want the cheapest big-screened 13-inch iPad. And finally, we have the very top of the line iPad Pro M5, which also comes in the very same sizes as the iPad Air M3s, being an 11-inch model, which costs $1,000, and a 13-inch model, which costs $1,300. Both featuring Apple's latest tandem OLED display technology, resulting in the display being able to get noticeably brighter than all the other iPad models. They have true black levels, better contrast ratios, and superior viewing angles. The iPad Pro M5s are the only iPads in the current lineup to feature OLED displays, the impressive display technology being one of the biggest selling points for the iPad Pro M5s. And also, the M5 iPad Pros here are the only iPads in the lineup to feature a 120Hz ProMotion display refresh rate, which means animations and scrolling will look and feel smoother than they do on any of the other iPads in the lineup. lineup. This is something that isn't going to matter to most people, and honestly it's something that a lot of people I talk to can't even notice, but it is nice to have. They're also not only the thinnest iPads ever made, but they're also the thinnest Apple products ever made. I mean, every iPad in the current lineup is quite thin, but the iPad Pro M5s are noticeably slimmer and also lighter. These are Apple's most powerful and premium iPads. Now, interestingly enough, you actually get a different amount of RAM based on the storage that you pick for your device. So if you get the 256 or 512 gigabyte version, you get 12 gigs of RAM, but if you get a 1 or 2 terabyte version, you get 16 gigs of RAM. I mean, these iPads will be able to handle any task you throw at them. If you use your iPad as your primary computer and your workflow is heavy with video, photo, or audio editing, there's just no better iPad than the iPad Pro M5. This being said though, most even power users of their iPads will be perfectly fine with an iPad Air M3. With the iPad Pro M5s, you pretty much have more power than you'll likely ever actually use. The iPad Pro M5s feature Face ID authentication as opposed to Touch ID, and of course they feature the great landscape 12 megapixel center stage camera that keeps you in frame as you move for your video calls, and a 12 megapixel rear facing camera that can actually shoot ProRes video and features a flash and LiDAR scanner alongside it, unlike most of the other iPads in the lineup except for the iPad mini in terms of the flash. The only two iPads in the current lineup that have flashes are the iPad mini and the iPad Pro M5, interestingly enough, so definitely not what you'd expect. The iPad Pro M5s also feature a slightly better screen-to-body ratio than any of the other iPads in the lineup, with the thinnest bezels. Besides that extra power from the M5 chip, this handful of premium additions are what set the iPad Pro M5 apart from the iPad Air M3s and even the base model iPad 11th gen. I mean, most of these additions are not going to be needed for most people's iPad use, but this is just Apple going balls to the wall, making the most premium and powerful iPad that they can. And of course, these being the top of the line iPads, Apple sells a Magic keyboard for it, which is the best version of an Apple keyboard that they sell. And you get full support for both Apple Pencils, being the base model Apple Pencil USB-C and the Apple Pencil Pro, with all the features like pressure sensitivity, double tapping and squeezing the pencil to change between different tools, wireless pairing and charging, Find My support, and more. 99% of people will never need an iPad Pro M5 over some of the other options in this lineup, but if you can afford it and if it's something that you value, having that bleeding edge tech experience that's so thin and so powerful, I mean, you certainly won't be disappointed with an iPad Pro M5. So guys, at the end of the day, if you want to use your iPad the way most people will probably end up using their iPads, which is for casual web browsing, some emailing, content consumption, maybe a little FaceTime or video calling, and even getting some light work done on it, the base model iPad 11th gen is by far the best value at $350. It gives you that full 11-inch iPad display experience. Now, if you push your iPad a little bit more, maybe you do something a little bit more processor intense, like some video editing, some audio editing, the iPad Air M3s are probably going to be the best option, as you get an incredibly powerful processor, you get support for the higher-end Apple Pencil Pro if you're an artist, and if you want a bigger screen than the base 11-inch size, you could go up to the 13-inch size, which the base model iPad 11th gen doesn't offer. And beyond that, again, I don't think anybody is really going to need an iPad Pro M5. I think the iPad Air M3 pretty much covers any realistic usage scenario, but again, it's the balls to the wall, most premium, most powerful iPad that you can get with a beautiful display and beautiful design. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think the base model iPad 11th gen or the iPad Air M3 are the only two iPads that make economic sense just in terms of getting a good value for most people. Again, unless you're a big tech enthusiast who's willing to invest a lot of money in an iPad just because it's the best one. And the iPad Pro M5 will certainly deliver on that front. But guys, that just about wraps it up for this video. I hope it was helpful. Let me know what iPad you're currently using in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and of course, as always, I'll catch you in the next one.